The privileged and often complicated childhood of Puyi, the last emperor of China. Puyi, the Xuantong Emperor, had a unique life that can only be split into several chapters. The first one here looks at his childhood and up to his being forced to flee the Forbidden City and the end of the period of his life of emperor in Imperial China. Puyi was born on the 7th of February 1906 and became the last emperor of China at the age of just 2 years old upon the death of his uncle, the Guangxu Emperor. Puyi was the 11th monarch of the Qing dynasty, and his period of rule lasted from 1908 until 1912, when he was forced to abdicate. Later, he sided with Imperial Japan and was placed as a puppet ruler by the Japanese in Manchukuo, Japanese-occupied Manchuria, and had hopes of even regaining power as the Emperor of China. When the Guangxu Emperor died without an heir, the Empress Dowager Cixi picked the nephew of the late Emperor Puyi, aged 2, as his successor. Puyi became the Xuantong Emperor, with his father, Zaifeng, Prince Chun, serving as regent. Empress Dowager Longyu signed the imperial edict of the abdication of the Qing Emperor on Puyi's behalf, and in return the royal family was offered the Articles of Favourable Treatment, which enabled Puyi to retain his royal title and continue to live in the Forbidden City. From the 1st to the 12th of July 1917, Puyi was briefly restored to the Qing throne by the loyalist general Chun. In 1924, Puyi was expelled from the capital by the warlord Feng Yuxiang after a coup. After this time, Puyi found refuge in the city of Tianjin while enjoying the company of various warlords as well as the Japanese, who had long desired the control of China. After the Japanese invasion of Manchuria and established the puppet state of Manchukuo in 1932, Puyi was installed as a chief executive. In 1934, Puyi was declared as the Emperor of Manchukuo under the era name of Kangde. He mostly resided in the imperial palace in Changchun, where he was closely controlled by the Japanese. At the end of the Second Sino-Japanese War in 1945, Puyi fled before he was captured by the Soviet Red Army. In 1946, he testified at the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal, and in 1950 he was repatriated to the People's Republic of China, where he was imprisoned and re-educated as a war criminal until his release in 1959. He died in 1967 and was buried close to the Western Qing tombs in a commercial cemetery. Puyi was married 5 times but had no children. Childhood and reign 1908 to 1912. Born in Beijing in 1906, Puyi was born into a life of privilege. His father was Zaifeng, the Prince Chun, a Manchu prince. His great-grandfather was the Daoguang Emperor. His great-uncle was the Xianfeng Emperor, and his grandfather was Yishuang, the first person to hold the title of Prince Chun. Chosen by Empress Dowager Cixi, Puyi became emperor at the age of 2 years and 10 months. Puyi's introduction to the life of an emperor began when palace officials arrived at his family's residence to take him without any advance notice. A procession of eunuchs and guardsmen informed Prince Chun that their 2-year-old son was to be the new emperor. The toddler screamed as he was taken away, with his parents unable to do anything as they lost their son. He was forced into a carriage that escorted him to the Forbidden City. Only his wet nurse, Wang Lianshou, was permitted to go with him. On his arrival, Puyi was taken to see Cixi herself dying. She would die the day after the death of the Guangxu Emperor. Puyi later wrote, "I still have a dim recollection of this meeting, the shock of which left a deep impression on my memory. I remember suddenly finding myself surrounded by strangers, while before me was hung a drab curtain through which I could see an emaciated and terrifying, hideous face. This was Cixi. It was said that I burst out into loud howls at the sight and started to tremble uncontrollably. Cixi told somebody to give me some sweets, but I threw them on the floor and yelled, "I want Nanny, I want Nanny." To her great displeasure, "What a naughty child," Cixi responded. "Take him away to play." After the death of Cixi, Puyi's father became a prince regent and carried his young son during the coronation ceremony. Crying over the scene before him, Puyi was uncontrollable once again. He later wrote in his autobiography that his father, in trying to comfort him, said, "Don't cry, it'll be over soon." Puyi did not see his biological mother for the next 7 years and formed a special bond with his wet nurse, who is credited as being the only person who could control him. However, she was sent away from the Forbidden City when Puyi was 8 years old. Later, after he married, Puyi would occasionally bring her into the Forbidden City and later to Manchukuo to visit him. Indulged, pampered, and revered. Growing up with scarcely any memory of a time when he was not indulged and revered, Puyi quickly became spoiled. The adults in his life, with the exception of Wang, were strangers, unable to discipline him. All were distant and remote. Wherever he went, grown men would kneel down in a ritual kowtow, averting their eyes until he passed. Puyi soon discovered the absolute power he wielded over the eunuchs, and he frequently had them beaten for the smallest of transgressions. As an emperor, Puyi's every whim was catered to, while no one said no to him, eventually turning the boy emperor into a sadistic individual who enjoyed degrading the eunuchs. An Anglo-French journalist, Edward Bayer, wrote how Puyi was permitted to fire his air gun at anyone that came into his sight without any repercussions. The position of emperor made him divine, unable to be remonstrated with or punished. He could only be differentially advised against ill-treating innocent eunuchs. However, if he chose to fire airgun pellets at eunuchs for no reason, that was his prerogative. Puyi was later reported to have said, "Flogging eunuchs was part of my daily routine. My cruelty and love of wielding power were already too firmly set for persuasion to have any effect on me." Every day, Puyi had to visit 5 former imperial concubines, known as his mothers, to report on his progress. He hated his mothers, not least because they prevented him seeing his real mother until he was 13 years old. The leader of his mothers was the autocratic Empress Dowager Cixi, who conspired to have Puyi's beloved wet nurse Wang expelled from the Forbidden City when he was 8 on the grounds that Puyi was too old to be breastfed. For Wang's expulsion, Puyi especially hated Cixi. Puyi later wrote, "Although I had many mothers, I never knew any motherly love." Empress Dowager Cixi ruled with paramount authority over the Qing imperial court, and although she was not the de jure regent, she was the de facto ruler of the Qing Empire. Puyi had a standard Confucian education, being taught the various Chinese classics and nothing else. Puyi later wrote, "I learned nothing of mathematics, let alone science, and for a long time I had no idea where Peking was situated." When Puyi was 13, he met his parents and siblings, all of whom had to kowtow before him as he sat upon the dragon throne. By the time of this meeting, Puyi had forgotten what his mother looked like. Such was the awe in which the emperor was held. His younger brother Puyi had never heard his parents refer to Puyi as "your older brother," but only as the emperor. Puyi had an image of the emperor prior to his meeting his brother for the first time, as that of a venerable old man with a beard. "I couldn't believe it when I saw this boy in yellow robes sitting solemnly on the throne." Although Puyi could now see his family again, this occurred rarely and always under the stifling rules of imperial etiquette. One consequence was that the relationship of Puyi with his parents was distant. Later in his life, Puyi was able to receive visits from his brothers and cousins, who provided a certain air of normality to his unique childhood. Eunuchs and the household department. Separated from his family, Puyi lived his childhood in a regime of virtual seclusion in the Forbidden City, surrounded by guards, eunuchs, and servants who treated him like a god. Puyi's upbringing was a mixture of pampering and mistreatment, as he was required to follow the rules of rigid Chinese imperial protocol and was ultimately unable to behave like a normal child. The eunuchs were virtual slaves and did all the work within the Forbidden City, jobs such as gardening, cooking, cleaning, entertaining guests, as well as all the bureaucratic work that was needed to govern such a vast empire. The eunuchs also served as the emperor's advisors. The Forbidden City was full of treasures that were regularly stolen and sold on the black market. The business of government and of providing for the emperor created further opportunities for corruption, in which almost every eunuch was involved. Furthermore, Puyi never had any privacy, with his every need attended to at all times. Eunuchs opened doors for him, dressed him, washed him. They even blew air into his soup to cool it for him. At meals, Puyi was always presented with a huge buffet containing every conceivable dish, the vast majority of which he did not eat, and every day he wore new clothes, as Chinese emperors never reused their clothing. After he was married for the first time, Puyi took control of the palace after he described an orgy of looting taking place that involved everyone from the highest to the lowest. Puyi claimed that by the end of the wedding ceremony, the pearls and jade in the empress's crown had been stolen, locks had been broken, and areas ransacked. Puyi's plan of action was to reform the household department. He brought in more outsiders to replace the aristocratic officers to improve accountability. But on the 27th of June 1923, a fire destroyed the area around the Palace of Established Happiness just at the time when the Emperor had ordered an inventory of one of the imperial warehouses. It was a blatant case of suspected arson to cover theft. Overheard conversations among the eunuchs made Puyi fear for his life, and 1 month after the fire he evicted all the eunuchs from the palace. The efforts at reform, however, did not last long, as Puyi was forced out of the Forbidden City in a coup led by Feng Yuxiang in 1924. The chapter of his life living in the Forbidden City was over as he fled to the city of Tianjin. That brings us to the end of this video, highlighting the beginning of the life story of Puyi, the Xuantong Emperor, whose quest to be restored as emperor took several twists throughout his life. Look out for the next installment in this fascinating story. If you have enjoyed watching and it's shown you a little detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.